quantum, the quantum mechanics. Hello witches, and welcome to Activist Witch, where we do witchcraft and activism. My name is Raven, my pronouns are they, them, and in this video we're going to discuss the science of witchcraft, or to be more precise, why I don't really think the two should ever meet. I think separation needed. But before we get started, let me remind you that Isha has opened a coffee, and if you like what we do here, you can support us directly there with a one-off donation, a monthly donation, or you can even get a tarot reading with her, Italian style. The low income option starts at £5, so if you decide to support us there, thank you so very much. So this is a video that I've been meaning to do for a while, actually to do a lot with Isha's reading of Caliban and the Witch, where when we start to see the Enlightenment happen in the, what, 1700s? 1700s. Yeah, when we start to see the Enlightenment happen in the 1700s, rationality takes hold, we strip ourselves of mysticism and any kind of esoteric woo and try to get down to like, these are facts, these are real, I'm a man, and therefore what I say on these matters most. This mindset took over in a lot of areas, so we get alchemy turning into science, we get healthcare predominantly done by male doctors, and essentially this chase for the elusive objective truth, that if we can just measure stuff hard enough, if we can just get enough of the details, then we'll be able to say like, no, this is true, this is real. And we don't really need to think about like what it means or what kind of impact it will have. Just so long as it's true, then it's good. There's been a lot of philosophical debate in the centuries since over how much of a role meaningfulness plays in the lives of everyday people. One thing I really liked, we watched film Contact recently, and I think the dichotomy put there between Matthew McConaughey's character and Jodie Foster's character is actually a really interesting example of this, where Ellie is very kind of science focused and sticks to the facts and the scientific method and what can be proven, while Matthew McConaughey's character, he's very much more in the line of, okay, but is that making us happy? And I do think both sides of those conversations are valid. What sparked me to actually kind of get up and sit in front of the camera and do this video though is the recent news, which if you're on Instagram Reels, if you're on TikTok, if you're on certain sides of YouTube, I'm sure, you'll have seen lots of videos about the new megastructures that have been discovered underneath the pyramids of Giza. And this is something that I think comes up time and time again in New Age, esoteric-y, occultish sides of the world, where as soon as someone puts together something that vaguely sounds scientific enough, people tend to jump at it, to cling to it as, aha, see, right, no, our ideas are true. There is a secret civilization of ancient technology that may have been given to us by aliens. Like, it just runs away so fast. And when you actually look at the piece of paper that people are holding up, it very rarely holds up to scrutiny, and there's a very good reason why that is. So the recent news that's kind of brought this topic back up again, because the original paper was published back in 2022, was at a conference where the scientists in charge of this research demonstrated what they believe to be underneath the pyramids and the structures that are there. And this has led into stories about scientists who've actually gone down into the superstructures and they found a pool of blue water, the bluest blue that you've ever seen. And they felt a presence there that made them very uncomfortable and made them want to run away, but no, they stuck with it. And it spirals out so quickly, and you get a lot of AI generated videos with this, and it just, what drives me up the wall about it is that there's such a wide spectrum between the paper that was produced and the stories that come out of it. And this is on purpose because it means that anyone who is temperamental to this kind of discovery, to this kind of idea, can fall anywhere along this spectrum and kind of be validated in their ideas. So someone who doesn't fall for the full-blown conspiracy nonsense can still go, oh, but this paper was really interesting and I can't wait to see what scientific research gets done here. And anyone who's fully on the conspiracy side of things doesn't care what the scientists have to say because the scientists are doing a cover-up. You see how there's no winning here. And the core of this that tends to generally kind of grate my gears when it comes to this kind of topic is just the idea that science has a place in magic. To get the original paper published, The authors had to very much tone down what they were saying, or what they wanted to say, in a way that would make it a bit more acceptable to the scientific community to try and give themselves legitimacy, because as a society we do value the legitimacy of sciences and the scientific method. However, even when they toned down the words that they were using in describing the technology that they were using, they were still ripped to shreds by the scientific community who peer reviewed their work. When it comes to the new stuff that they're announcing, they're not even bothering to tone it down. It's not getting published in any scientific journals, but they did get that one paper published. So that's the thing that they can always point to, because that has value. Does it though? My greatest bugbear when it comes to anything new agey or witchy is quantum, the quantum mechanics, the quantumization of the quantum mechanics and the mechanicization of it. It drives me up the wall, and there's two issues to this. One is a science communication issue. Massively recommend checking out the YouTube channel Angela Collier. She essentially reviews science communication and goes into stories of science and tries to explain the real science behind things as best that she can, while also explaining why, if you haven't done a physics degree, if you haven't taken classes in quantum mechanics, and even if you have, you're still going to struggle with a lot of these ideas because they are maths. But because society values scientific endeavor and scientific discovery, every time something new is discovered in physics, we want to talk about it. It's just like, it sounds elitist, but the science behind quantum mechanics is just so complicated that there isn't a way to describe it intuitively and accurately. And so what usually happens is when a scientist publishes a paper, a journalist will notice that paper's been published, and they will get into contact with the university or the institution where that scientist is working. That university or institution will usually have a press outreach or a science communicator whose job it is to talk to the journalists, because the scientists need to keep doing their work. So that science communications or press outreach officer will then speak to the scientist and ask them to try and explain it in the best way that they can then take that information and give it to the journalist. And you can see there are steps of removal between what the scientist is actually doing, the way that the press officer has then translated it, and the way that the journalist has to frame it to make it exciting to get more clicks, because people value scientific discovery and scientific endeavor, and we want people to be excited about this stuff. It's great, but unfortunately there are some side effects of this when it is done badly, and the way that quantum mechanical occurrences and features have spread out and taken out of context and isolated to essentially be a free-for-all evidence that anything can happen. I mean, even to take this back to myself, even on one of the videos I've been part of on this channel, I've said that Foolish Fish's example of how the double slit experiment applies to the manifestation that's done with magical workings, where essentially his idea was that with the double slit experiment, when you observe the photon, which of the slits is going to go through, you collapse the wave function, and instead of behaving like a wave, it behaves more like a particle. And so in doing so, we can collapse the probability of events by observing them in our mind's eye. So if we just keep visualizing the outcome that we want, that in doing so, we are doing the observation that collapses the wave function, the probabilities condense, and we make the outcome that we want much more likely. And I have gone on record as saying that actually I quite like that explanation. What I forgot when I said that is the definition of observe when it comes to quantum mechanics. And the observer effect is something that gets spread all the time. You've probably heard of it, that anything once it's observed changes. Its properties physically change by doing it. We have things like the uncertainty principle. Like one of the things that gets spread out is the observer effect. The idea that when you observe something, you physically change its properties. And this is something that gets repeated on television, in films, and then again on TikTok and Instagram, and even, I'm sure, plenty of witchy books. However, that's the public-facing side of it. That's the information that's passed from the press officer to the journalist to the public. Like that's that version of things. When, to be more accurate, The observer effect, by definition, involves interacting with a particle. You cannot tell which of the two slits an electron or a photon has traveled through unless you interact with it in some way, and it is that interaction that causes the waveform to collapse. And this is essentially my point when it comes to why science and magic, I don't think, should really meld together or use one to bolster up the other. It's because science is material. It involves materially doing something and recording the outcome in a way that can be explained well enough that you can make predictions from. That's very limited when it comes to what we're trying to do with magic and witchcraft and the occult. There's a lot of things that you can't apply that to. So if we're going to take a materialist quantum mechanical view on manifestation and magical workings and getting to an outcome that we want, we take the definition that by observing something we must interact with it and therefore changing its properties. The materialist view of manifesting your outcomes is that you have to interact with your outcomes. You have to do things that will bring them into force. You have to take the actions that will lead you to get there. And so you can say that by doing magical workings regularly, you're keeping that focus in mind, you're keeping that goal, so that the choices that you make throughout your day are choices that interact with the outcome that you're trying to reach to, and that sets you on the best path towards your goals. But that's not necessarily magic then. You see what I mean? Like, I don't think that magic should really exist in this God-shaped hole where science explains everything and then what's left over is magic. Because that's going to keep shrinking down and down and down until it eventually disappears. And that's not to say that what I've just described as the means via which getting the outcome that you want from doing a magical working isn't how it works. Maybe that is how it works. My point is essentially that if it works, it works. And the why doesn't necessarily add value to me, and I don't think it necessarily should add value. But when you call upon quantum mechanics, or when you call upon science to try and give a vague explanation for how things work, then you are inherently making it material. And if all that we're doing is material, then why are we calling it magic? Like, we call it magic because we like it being magic. We do witchcraft because we like that it's witchcraft. It gives us meaning, it gives us purpose to what we do. And I think it's completely fair for us to just stand by that, to be, this is the meaning that I give it, and I do what I do because it works when I do it. That's fine, that's enough. You know, when I watched Contact for the first time and rewatched it through my teenage years, I was absolutely on Ellie's side with things. That everything can be measured and the scientific method is what's important, and if God can't be measured, then I don't need God in my life. But then I think about the scene in the movie where she sees the great celestial event and she suddenly realizes that science can't give meaning to the feelings that she's experiencing while she's looking at it. You know, she doesn't say we should have sent a prophet, she says we should have sent a poet, but poetry isn't science. And I do think there is something very poetic about magic and the way that we do things. Anyway, this was just a quick rant from me because my Instagram feed is getting me very riled up lately, and yeah, we've been doing a few rants on this channel lately and they are quite fun. I do have a much larger video essay planned on examining the Enlightenment, the harm that has been caused when it comes to things like misogyny, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and alternate ways that we could start to reapproach these things if we just let ourselves give up the idea that there is an objective truth. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, please do let us know in the comments below. And I hope this video was useful for you. And until the next time, I really hope that we can hex the patriarchy together because there's need for it.